You're listening to the Sass Says podcast. I'm your host, Christy Rocha, also known as Sass. I identify as a woman, a wife, and a mother. That should tell you a lot already. And over the last few years, I've learned the value of talk therapy. I have seen how my inner work not only enhances my own well-being, but also my marriage, my parenting, my relationships. And in fact, you wouldn't be hearing this right now if it weren't for the work I've done. My mission is to debunk the misconceptions and stigmas around what therapy is and who it's for. Let's normalize working on our mental health and seeking help when needed. We've all heard of self-care, self-help, and self-love, but do you often wonder how to actually make it all happen? I do. You'll hear strategy-based conversations with professionals, as well as inspiring and validating stories from women who are just like you and me. Think of this podcast as the weekly therapy sessions you didn't know you needed, with a dash of sass, a lot of vulnerability, and me, relentlessly asking, but how? Hello. Okay, buckle up. My guest today is Corrin Voeller. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist in private practice. Her practice, Prosper Therapy in St. Louis Park, Minnesota, specializes in helping couples improve communication, create closer connections, fight less, see eye to eye, and enrich their sex lives. Corrin works with couples considering divorce, non-monogamy, recovering after an affair, and couples in crisis as well. This conversation is loaded with real-life, insanely relatable examples and situations of conversations that happen within couples and how to handle them. We talk about the deeper meaning behind common issues, best practices and common mistakes when arguing, and how assumed gender roles play a role in the big challenges that couples face. Corrin shares more about her expertise in discernment counseling, emotional intelligence, and dissociation. Okay, so like I said, get ready. Here we go. Hey, Corrin, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to talk to you.
I think I know I am more excited than you are because I had to stop myself with the notes I was making and had to also remind myself that you are not my couples therapist. but I have questions around that, so we'll get to it.
Wait, here's my disclaimer. I am not your therapist. Yeah. This is not therapy. This is just a conversation.
I know. And thankfully I do have my own, so anything that might come up here I can take to her, but she works with me. She doesn't work with my marriage necessarily from the standpoint that you do, and we'll get to that. I'm jumping ahead, but anyway, thank you for being here, and I'm gonna try to reel myself in a little bit.
I love that.
So I wanna, I guess, before we get to all of that, I told you off air that I listened to an interview you did, kind of giving your background, and one thing I did want to ask you about before we get into what you do now is your time working at the Inpatient psychiatric hospital. I thought that was fascinating, and what I really wanted to know is you said specifically that you learned a lot of de-escalation skills, and I was like itching for him to ask you to elaborate on what that means and how maybe you take it into the work you do now. Like, I don't know, I just liked that phrase. So if you could talk about that for a second, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, I'd love to. So in inpatient psych, I was there's many different names that we go by, but it's like a mental health, now I can't even think of like a mental health associate or a behavioral technician. Like there's all sorts of different things, but basically what our role was to help manage basically the general mood. And then if there was ever like a mental health emergency or behavioral emergency, our job was to de-escalate that situation. And so that's the entire job, was just showing up and being there and literally watching people and how they react and what's going on, and kind of being aware to notice when things are starting to ratchet up. But then if another unit was experiencing a behavioral emergency, then they would call what was a code green over the announcement, and then we would take off, run to that unit, and then try to de-escalate the situation because, I don't know if a lot of people know this, but nurses, they get assaulted very frequently on the
Mm.
job,
Mm.
and because people are in an extremely vulnerable position. But anyway, we used a lot of de-escalation all throughout the day, and for me, it was just normal because that was my job. So for years, I my whole entire 8-hour shift, sometimes double 16-hour shifts,
Mm.
was watching people, being able to read their mood, and then and try to help calm them down when things started to escalate. But then when things were already escalated, to really be able to use different techniques to de-escalate the situation. So a lot of that, what that looks like is, speaking to the need that they have in the moment.
Mm.
And some of that just kind of, it's listening to them, but it's also being intuitive. If they in a hospital situation, it would be like, they're very angry because they're super hungry. What they're actually screaming or upset about is the disrespect that they experienced while trying to get something. You know what
Mm.
I mean? And so
Mm-hmm.
then it would become like sometimes like a power struggle or something. And so a lot of the times it was just like, well, let's go to that basic need. You wanted some crackers? Let me get you some crackers. Like, I don't need to get into this power struggle with you. And then let's talk about how you felt when you felt super disrespected, right? It was always
Mm-hmm.
about going back to, well, what's going on for you and focusing on the other person rather than focusing on how I feel about the situation.
Mm.
So being able to really, how how would I describe it? It'd be like a healthy disassociation for
Ah.
me, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
being able to like separate yourself in
Mm-hmm.
those moments from what is actually happening and really being able to focus on the other person. So I that is a lot of what couples counseling can be sometimes, is like,
Yeah.
you know, um, people will worry about my judgment of them or worry about what I'm thinking. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, oh my gosh, you guys, like, I'm not even thinking things. Like, I tell people that all the time. I'm like, because I'm not thinking about like what I think about this situation.
Right.
I'm like looking for the pattern.
Right.
I'm looking for what you're trying to say, like what's going on for you, like, and so I don't even have a second for judgment in those situations. I don't think about what I would do in this situation. Like, it's all about you guys and helping you connect better and helping you de-escalate. And I think everybody could use de-escalation skills, like really being able to sometimes separate yourself out, you out from that moment and be like, well, wait, tell me more about what's going on for you right now. And then how can I help meet those needs so that we can get, your prefrontal cortex, your thinking brain back online, and we can move forward from this.
Yeah.
So if you were looking for like a 1 minute answer, I'm so sorry, but
No, no, not at
that's what
all.
that.
I want the long-winded ones because I think it's so interesting. And as you were talking before, obviously made the connection to the work you do now with couples. I mean, that's all I was thinking about. I mean, being in that environment for you and then going to couples, I'm sure you have challenging moments, but to have that experience in the hospitals must feel a little bit like, you know what, I got this with this unhappy couple, because it's it's the same. It feels the same, but on a lower scale or a more
Yeah.
manageable scale. I don't know. I don't know.
Yes, exactly. Completely. Yeah. I used to tell people, I don't say this anymore because of the pandemic, but I used to tell people like the messier, the better. Like send me the couples that you don't want to work with because it doesn't scare me. Like
Mm-hmm.
like big reactions or complicated situations. That doesn't scare me because at the end of the day, these are two humans who both really want just what's best for themselves. And often, most of the time, they really do love their partner
Mm.
and they want what's best for them. And there's just some sort of like disconnection that's happening. And so it's kind of being able to sift through all of the noise and help them see, like, okay, well, when you really get down to it, it's this. And if you just
Mm.
focus on that and, don't get pull in too many details, you guys can really connect a lot better. So
Yeah.
yeah, in the therapy room, there haven't been many moments that have impacted me, and I had no idea that while in the hospital I was training for this
Yeah.
this whole time.
Would you say that your ability to do that, that healthy dissociation, did that come from training, or is that sort of innately who you are to some sense? Like, how did you learn to do that, or is it, like I said, just something that you've always naturally been able to do?
Yeah, I would say probably there's a little bit of both, but it is definitely a skill that can be worked on.
Mm.
So for anybody listening, like that is a lot of what emotional intelligence is. It's being able to have self-awareness of what's going on for you in the moment, and then also being able to manage that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that is a skill. So when you are working on like regulating, that's exactly what you're doing, and you're learning
Mm.
how to self-soothe or um, a lot of times it's about practicing removing yourself from this situation, not having as much of a reaction, and being able to turn on listening a lot better. And everybody can build on that. I have moments, like everybody else, when it's a little harder. I was just telling somebody, I think I was live on something, all this social media now, where I had a moment at a store, and I've never really had one of these, but where it was, the an employee had done something, and it felt so unfair, and she was so rude, and and I'm usually curious in those moments, or I'm like, oh wow, or I always tell my husband, so like I'm like the least angry person when I'm driving because always practicing that, right? Like I'm always like, oh,
Mm.
I don't know their situation. Like, who knows? There might be an emergency. Like I'm always like unaffected. And
Yeah.
it's not because I don't feel that temptation to get mad. It's not
Mm.
because I don't sometimes, sometimes we want to itch that scratch and we want to be upset. But it is something that I work on constantly. And that's what I would want to say to everybody is like, it's even if you're not great at it in the moment, maybe if you weren't born with that skill, it is something that you can build on. And
Yeah.
just going back to that story at the store, I just was like, I had like a very physical reaction because I was embarrassed, that person didn't understand, they yelled at me. Oh, it
Mm.
felt so unfair.
Mm-hmm.
And so then when I got in my car, I was doing all my things. I was like, okay, give me my distraction. And my brain kept pulling me back to it
Mm.
over and over and over. And I had to crank up music so loud and like a super corny song that I love, like a Taylor Swift song where I know all the words. And I had to like belt it for a good few. I mean, I would say it probably took at least 20 seconds before I was able to like really focus on the song and not allow my brain to keep pulling me
Wow.
back there.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, you talk a lot about emotional intelligence on your TikTok account, and
mhm.
um there's one that I'm recalling right now that it was something about like the like frequently, and I'd like to say up front that a lot of the questions I'm going to ask you are going to pertain to overgeneralized, like heteronormative couples. I mean, I know
Yeah.
that there's going to be a lot of variation, not only person to person, but the type of couple, the type of relationship. But I know, like, for me, because this is my show, I want to make it as relatable to me as possible. So that I'm just going to preface this question by saying that. But there's a video about a husband saying something like, I'm not unhappy. I'm just unhappy that my wife is unhappy. And you equate that to emotional intelligence. Can you explain a little bit more about what emotional intelligence means and how you see it play out in the, typical heteronormative husband-wife dynamic?
Yeah. Yeah, and I completely agree with that too of like this whole we are using very gendered language. We're talking about one specific scenario, and I think um, it obviously, I hope people see themselves in it,
Yes.
in these scenarios,
Yeah.
and they use the parts that fit for them, and they let go of the parts that don't fit for them.
Yes.
But
Thank.
I do see this same sort of experience keep coming up with the hetero cisgen,
Yeah.
I
Yes.
do
Yes.
see it
Yes.
with this very specific couple, and they all use the exact same language,
Mm.
which I find fascinating. I like that they all have this same experience, even though none of these people know each other.
Mm-hmm.
They are all using this, like, that statement. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that statement of, like, I am not unhappy in this relationship. It generally works pretty well for them. For these men, this relationship works pretty well for them. They're just unhappy that their wife is so unhappy.
Mm.
And and they say, well, I know that she has, the way it relates to emotional intelligence, the way I see it relating to that is because if I dig into that a little bit more with them, they will say, I know that this has been going on for a while, but I
Mm.
thought that was normal. And
Mm.
he's like, well, what do you mean by that? And he's like, well, she's been complaining for a long time or whatever, but I just thought that's what's supposed to happen.
Mm.
That she's supposed to be upset, that she's
Like the
supposed to come.
nagging wife.
Yep, the
Yeah.
nagging wife trope, like
Mm.
that and like marriage is hard, and so she's supposed to be a little disappointed in it, and she is gonna, be frustrated with me, um, and that's just the way it is. Where for these women, they feel so dismissed, and they're like, this wasn't just like minor complaints. I'm
Mm.
asking for deeper connection. I'm asking for you to be more involved and to take active responsibility within the family. And you dismiss me when I bring up these concerns,
Mm.
and it's not taken seriously. And it's almost like the men just miss the message.
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
because I hear all the time, it's not that I don't not care. I do care. I just thought it was the way it was supposed to be. And I think if we were socializing men to work on their emotional intelligence as much as we socialize women to do that,
Yeah.
that they wouldn't be doing that. They wouldn't dismiss it. It would be like, oh, when you say that you're unhappy, like that's serious, right? If your best friend came to you and they were like, I'm so unhappy, you would be like, oh,
Right.
stop everything. Oh my gosh, this is like monumental.
Right.
They're not putting people's emotional experiences, they're not giving as much weight behind it as it deserves.
Mm.
And I say this a lot in my videos, and then I get a lot of comments, which I understand. It's hard to describe exactly what I'm trying to say in a 3-minute video while also including all this other information. But I also say, like, I don't think it's their fault, which I'm not saying it's not their responsibility to now
Right.
figure out.
Right.
But they aren't socialized the same way that we are. And that's what I mean when I say it wasn't their fault that people weren't pushing this, that people weren't trying to talk to them about it. But it is now their responsibility to work on it, especially if they don't want to lose their marriage.
Yeah. All right. So talk to me about like, so say someone's listening and, they're recognizing this in their partner. We just got done saying that it's not their fault. They haven't been socialized. And a woman is listening and going, yeah, I can relate to this. How do they start to maybe have these conversations with their partner? Like, as I'm imagining sitting down and saying to my husband, hey, I'd like to talk to you about your emotional intelligence. And he's going to be like, I think not. Like, where do we start to have the conversations before, say, therapy is in play or if therapy's not an option?
Yeah, this is one of the hardest questions to answer
Yeah.
because I think it's so different for each couple. And you're right, like it would be so nice if you could just bring it up. And they're like, oh, yeah, thank you for letting me know. I'm so glad you said that. Let's work on this together, babe.
Right.
Like, and
Right.
that's just not generally how it goes, right? Like, they're like, no, like, you're wrong. This isn't a thing. Maybe just try not being so mad at me all the time, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
maybe try relaxing or something like that, but
Right.
nothing else really changes. And unfortunately, what usually goes hand in hand with not having a lot of emotional intelligence is getting very defensive when people try to address issues with you, right? It goes back to what we were just talking about, how when I said, that self-regulation that I'm always working on, and that a lot of people are always working on, we really goes hand in hand with working on not getting defensive, right? Like that situation of the store, I could have responded back and been like, you don't know what's going on here. What about this? And blah, 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 blah. And instead it was more like, okay, obviously this was more about you than about me. Just, I'm going to disengage. I'm going to walk away. I'm going to reflect on, what was it that I could have done wrong, or how might have she seen that? And how might have, how might, sorry, how, I can't even think how to say this. How might she have viewed my behavior that contributed to what she thought, right? And so all of that is part of emotional intelligence. So what you just said of how do you bring this up in a way where they're not going to get defensive, they're going to agree with you, and they're going to take it seriously. And unfortunately, I don't know if there's a great answer to that. I think a lot of times it requires some leverage, like for something to change, and that's not me saying give them an ultimatum.
Right.
It's saying, you do have to have some leverage, right? You have to say, like, these things aren't working and this is what's going to happen until we take it seriously. Like, perhaps I'm going to disengage in other parts of our relationship together. Or, like, you have to have some sort of leverage to say, like, hey, this is serious enough for you to want to put in the time and effort and hard work that it requires to take a look at this and work on it. So
I think, and I made sure to say that you couldn't say this, but I think the best answer is probably therapy.
therapy.
Right. I mean,
yeah, but it's hard to get, especially in these types of situations, right? This situation where you have a man who does not talk about emotions, who does not enjoy having conversations about, self-reflection and what is it that you meant by this, and what, all of these different types of things. That is what therapy is.
Yes, I know.
And so, like, you go to them and you're like, I think we need therapy. And they're going to be like, that sounds like my worst nightmare. Like, no, we don't. The other thing is that therapy is getting more normalized, thank God. And it still carries a lot of stigma and misunderstanding. Like I said earlier, people often think that I'm judging them, right? And like, that's just a giant mischaracterization of what therapy is. Your therapist is completely non-judgmental.
Right.
I never am sitting there thinking like, you're right, you're wrong. I can't believe these guys. All these different types of things that you think is going to happen. For a lot of men, what they say is, I was worried that we were going to come in here and it was just going to be you guys ganging up on me and telling me everything that's wrong with me. And honestly, that's what a lot of my comments on TikTok look like too, from men, is like, oh, you don't understand men, and this is just you guys bashing them. And it's like, no, that's exactly what I'm saying, is like, when I say it's not your fault, that's what I'm talking to, right? It's not about you being wrong. It's about saying this thing is occurring between us and it really needs to change. Those men that, when they say, I knew there were problems, I wasn't unhappy in this relationship, I'm just unhappy that she was unhappy. Or, when she does say, I'm going to divorce you, and he feels blindsided and willing to do anything, they want to learn this now. Like, you have all of the leverage in the world, because they're like, these are good guys. They do not want the relationship to end. They thought they had more rope left
Mm-hmm.
on there. You
Mm-hmm.
know, they truly did not realize. And now that they know, now that they have this understanding, they want to know. Like, I get messages daily from people saying, I want to learn emotional intelligence. This is me. I have to work on this. Our relationship is so painful, but it matters to me so much. I don't want it to end. Um, and unfortunately, I think without feeling the pain, the painfulness of, hey, this isn't working and she's really unhappy and she's saying like this has to change. For a lot of people, it takes that in order for them to see the problem.
Yeah.
And my assistant and she was like, I have the greatest idea. You're going to make a video and and women can use it and they can send it to people. They can send it to their partner and it's going to be like, hey, guy, if you're receiving this, it's time to be very serious. Like,
Yeah.
there's an issue.
Yeah.
Take it from me. I'm kind of scared of it a little. I think it could be good, but I could also see it going really badly too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and what comes to mind for me is that what I don't know whether it's in pop culture or just in my experience with different relationships, that unfortunately a lot of times by the time the husband has his back against the wall and he's ready to learn and change, like, she's already got one foot out the door. Like, emotionally too, she's already pretty done. Like, I don't, so with your clients, who's coming to you and how are they getting there? What are, like, if it's so generally speaking hard for men to understand this concept. And the other thing that I thought of as you were saying it is that women need to understand that they're not going to go there and just have a cheerleader on their side in therapy too,
Yeah.
right? But who's coming to you and what are they hoping to get out of the experience?
I specialize in working with people considering divorce.
Okay.
And so they are what you just said, that person who has one foot out the door and but they're willing to take a look at the relationship and examine and decide, am I truly going to leave this or not? So I do a specific type of counseling. A lot of times it's called Discernment Counseling. And it's a very structured process. And it's all about looking at the relationship, taking a bird's eye view, getting clarity, and all about making decisions versus making changes. That's where the biggest difference is. And then a lot of times they'll stay on with me and decide to do couples counseling. Often because it is what we just talked about, is he feels very seen too. Like, he gets it. He's bought into the process because I see that this is a good guy who wants what's best and he wants to learn. And the same on her end, it is hard when you're at this point to have to take a look at the stuff that you've contributed to. But people often are willing to. So yeah, there was something else you said though that I wanted to talk about, and I can't think of what it is. So somebody is back against the wall, who one foot out the door. Oh, I remember. I'm sorry. So when couples are at this point, right, where somebody's like, I have one foot out the door, and it's so painful for that person too, right? Like, I think that in our culture or in society, whatever you want to call it, I always hate those words because it's like, what are we even talking about? But you see what I'm saying? Like, in the content that's out there, in the ways that we talk about it, a lot of it is focused on what is it like to be the person who's been broken up with, right? Like, that is so hard to be left, right? And but it's also really, really hard to leave. Yeah. Because for them, they're usually the one who's been asking and saying something needs to change. Here's the issue. And every time it doesn't, it is heartbreaking. Yeah. And it is a long process. And so what we talk a lot about in those sessions, and what I really like about doing this work, is because the stakes are so high, people are really willing to go deep and really get it out there. And it's just refreshing to just be able to be like, just share it, just bear it, just be there, And we talk about, in order to turn things around, you need to take radical accountability right now,
Mm.
which means not only taking accountability for the relationship and like those moments when, all of the things that need to change, but also taking accountability for all of the times when, she, in this case, usually she has been saying this needs to change and you dismissed her.
Mm-hmm.
And that heartbreak that happened,
Yeah.
because that is so painful for people to, they want this relationship, they want to make it work, and they try, and they'll say, I tried to approach it differently. I'd bring it up this way and then they would get defensive. So then I would wait till they were in a really good mood and then I would try to do it this way. Or I would write a letter and spend 6 months writing this perfectly worded letter, and nothing. And then they have to go through this thing, this like almost identity crisis where they're like, can I walk away? Can I end this? Can I truly leave somebody that I actually do love, but this isn't working for me? I've brought it up. I've tried. And then they have to build themselves up to know that it's okay, because often there's kids involved too.
Right.
So what is this going to mean for me? What is this going to mean for them? And then they finally build themselves up to have the courage to know that they're going to be okay and to know that they're going to do it. And then they've also said like he in this case, but remember it's always open to many different people, but he obviously doesn't care to change. And so, this is the only option then. I can either accept this or I can move on. And then they do it. That takes an immense amount of courage. And then they say, all right, it often goes against their identity as like, a quitter, or, I thought this was forever too. And I had to reconcile that.
Mm-hmm.
And then now he says he's willing to do anything.
Right.
Now that I've finally decided I'm going to be okay. Right. And so that's what I'm talking about when I'm like, wow, it takes radical accountability. You need to not only say, hey, this needs, I'm willing to do this work and I'm taking accountability for what wasn't working, but I'm also taking accountability for what that experience was like for you and how hard it is for you to now soften towards the relationship after you've spent months and sometimes years building yourself up to know that you're okay. And it's really a gift that somebody's willing to do that, is willing to take down those walls and risk being hurt again in order to try.
Yeah. I think you just made, I know you just made so many women feel so seen right now, and validating that experience for them, because you're right. I mean, we do place so much emphasis on the person who's left. And as you were talking, I was even thinking about, when using this example, she comes to that point of ready to leave, and that facing, like you said, the identity crisis of, can I do this? Am I willing to do this? And there's also, it's like like up until that point, she's faced so much rejection already that yes,
right.
She may be the one who left ultimately, but and so we look to the partner who's left as saying, wow, you've been rejected by. It's like, no, this person finally left because she's been so rejected for so long. We forget that.
Exactly.
I think
we forget that.
And we, I've had some conversations with some divorce coaches and things who want to talk about, and rightfully so, that oftentimes the response that someone, particularly a woman going through a divorce, gets is, oh, I'm so sorry. And a lot of times it's actually, no, like it's a good thing. Like, I've come to the other side. I'm going to restart my life. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. But even that, even when we try to champion those women as saying, you know what, I'm so proud of you, I'm here for you, we're then still not acknowledging all the pain that happened up until that point. There are women that, can't imagine their lives any other way once they've moved on from a relationship that was no longer serving them. But we sort of jump to the, yay, good for you, like girl power. And we we don't acknowledge or validate all of the pain that went into that experience, even though the end result is ultimately something that she wants and is empowering for her.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, it's almost that you know, the watching, it's like you are saying that the person who's left, you know, with that empowerment, you're kind of like, you know, you've got it better, right? Like you're the one who's deciding
Right.
to move on, and you've already been through that, or been through all of the work. It's not, it doesn't take accountability for all of the work and the
Right.
heartache and the lost hope.
Oh,
I feel
yeah.
like that's
Oh,
so
yeah.
huge.
Yeah.
The lost hope, because that's what they have to give up, right?
Yeah.
Hope that there was going to be change, and then it didn't happen, you know. And it's, I always just say it's hard for both, and I also know both are going to be okay.
Yeah. Do you think that every couple should seek counseling at some point?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I was hoping you would say yes, so don't feel funny about that.
Yeah, I was like, I had that reaction of like, this isn't just like self-preservation for my job, because therapists, we have more than enough clients right now.
Yeah.
No, counseling counseling works.
Yeah.
It's so good. You know, even when it's not the greatest thing ever, it's, you know, dedicating time to looking at your relationship and the things that are working and the things that aren't, and being open to the feedback and open to connecting deeper. I mean, it it's so good. It's so good. And I think that, you know, I don't know if it needs to technically out. I think counseling is amazing because it's with somebody who's really trained,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes people will be like, oh yeah, I've done counseling. And then I hear like, they're like, I talked with a really good friend who's super into this stuff,
Right.
you know, and I'm like, oh, like that's close, but not quite, right? Like
Right.
a counselor's been in school for many, many years. And like, and so sometimes I won't ever forget, I had one session, it was a first session with a person. And, they said, at the end of the session, like as they were walking out the door, they were like, what is counseling exactly? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what is it?
Mm-hmm.
Isn't it just talking? And I was like, you know, and like, well, I guess that's part of it,
Right.
but it's so much more than that. Like there's actual, you know, evidence-based things that are happening underneath that you might not understand or you might not see, but it does move you forward.
Mm-hmm.
It does help with the issues that you're having. You might not understand exactly what's going on in the moment, though, or what's even being done to help you do that. And sometimes it's through challenging you, and just having somebody lovingly challenge you a little bit, right? And that's the work that was happening versus you just talking about how you feel about things. I think that's what people tend to think that it is.
Yeah.
Can't remember what your question was. Oh, should all couples go to counseling?
Yeah, but I think that there's still this stigma around it, right? Like it's the second someone hears, oh, they're in counseling, it's like, oh, are they going to be okay? What's going on? And yes, there certainly is a time and a place for that type of counseling. It's your work, right? It's they're getting down to that decision time. Are we in or are we out? But I only base this off of my own experience doing one-on-one counseling, how much it's helped me, that I can imagine even a seemingly perfectly happy couple would benefit from that time and that space to just talk things out in a way that is, I want to say controlled, and I don't mean a negative spin. I feel like controlling often has that negative spin on it, but just in a I don't know, a fair environment, a even playing field. I don't know. I'm gonna keep trying to come up with something. I'm just gonna stop there. But anyway, I don't know. It just, again, just occurs to me that would be true, but unfortunately, I still don't think that is generally accepted as okay to do.
Yeah,
we're getting
it's
there,
like,
but
we're getting there.
Yeah, we are, but it's not there yet. As in I'm a therapist. Like you and I, we're getting there. We're making it happen.
We're all in this together. No, you're right. It's almost like we're still saying I have a problem
Yeah.
that needs to be fixed and there's something wrong here. And it's also for people who are just trying to do better,
Mm-hmm.
and just trying to see what's going on. Um, I see more and more couples coming in for that kind of work too, and so I just think that that's really exciting. One of my favorite they like I love all of my clients, but the ones that really fire me up are when I work with people who like don't believe in counseling, or they're like, oh, like this isn't, and they tend not, I'll just even say who it is. It's like engineer men for me.
Yeah.
They're like my favorite because like they just, to watch them go from like very skeptical
Yeah.
to loving therapy and
Yeah.
being like, this is the greatest thing ever. Like they cannot wait to come back in to tell me all of the things and that they were thinking about and all of the connections that they've made. And they often make such amazing connections where I'm like, that's the perfect
Yeah.
analogy. Like, are you kidding me? Like,
Yeah.
it's just so exciting.
Yeah.
And so just to watch people, I think if you've been, I know what your podcast is about. So, if you are considering it, if you've ever considered therapy and you're scared, and you're like, I'm not quite sure if this is for me, like you can just try it on. You can just
Mm.
try and see what happens
Mm-hmm.
and be open to the experience. And, sometimes it's going to be uncomfortable, but most of the I think, most people like once you get in there, you're like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Somebody who's just focused on me
Yep.
and and how I think and non-judgmental. Like we all need that.
Totally.
I was talking to somebody who said, if they were like, if we had women in charge, like every baby would be born with a therapist. Like,
Yes.
you
Yes.
get your social security number,
Yes.
and then you also get your therapist assignment number, and it's
I
just
just
like
heard that
everyone has one.
recently. What did I, do you
I
know? Do
don't
you
know.
remember where you heard it? I feel like I just heard that too. That's so
I don't
funny.
know.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I can't
100%.
remember where I heard it either too. And I was like, yes, that's exactly. It's so good. It's like everybody could use one.
I
And like,
I think I just remembered on my end who it was. I think it was my friend my friend's mom. She like commented on something on my Instagram saying exactly that. She's like, we should just all get one at birth. Here you go.
yeah,
That's
here's
funny.
here's yours.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is your non-judgmental, super supportive, highly trained person who's
Uh,
there to help you navigate the life's toughest moments
who
and
wouldn't want
also
that?
the better ones too. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's amazing. I have my own therapist.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it's amazing.
Do you find that there are different challenges presented with your clients that have kids versus the ones that don't?
Yeah, for sure. They're just different. I wouldn't say harder or
Yeah.
anything like that, but yeah, I mean, there are just different ones. Parenting is a journey, and we're always going through different
Yeah.
parental identity
Hmm.
transitions too. And so, there's just so many things that come with the parenting that I think a lot of us aren't prepared for. I wasn't prepared for.
Yeah.
I didn't realize.
Hmm.
And so that they do go through different challenges, but often some of the same challenges too as people without children. And I've also learned to ask about fur children because
Ah,
a lot of the, not all, but some of the same challenges can be played out with fur kids
interesting.
than with children.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes it's about like taking responsibility or um, feeling jealous, over different
Yeah.
relationships. And then there's also, because of the work I do where people are considering ending their marriage, sometimes the, sorry, I'm blanking on how to say this. Sometimes they're also trying to decide, they don't want to lose their
Yeah. Who
their
gets
fur
the
kid
dog? Yeah. Who's,
who gets
yeah. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, I,
Or like, oh, or I've had it where people were like, we both understand that this is done and that this should be done, but I know that the dog is more attached to him or the dog is more
oh,
attached to
wow.
her.
Yeah.
And so even if they say like I get to see it more, I can't imagine not seeing my dog every day. Like That's,
Yeah.
it's very real.
Yeah. 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 It's reminding me of another one or a few of your videos that really resonated with me about and you mentioned it earlier, but the active versus passive responsibility. I feel like that, whether it's fur babies or real babies, that's a big one. That's one I hear a lot, like, yeah, my husband, again, using this generalized example, but yeah, my husband is always, ready and willing to help, but I have to give him the instructions from A to Z on how to help. And then it's just easier for me to do it myself. And then women are burnt out, moms are losing their minds, and men are looking at them, their partners are looking at them like, well, I said I would help.
Yeah, that statement of I'm willing to help, you just need to tell me what to do, or I'm always, I'm willing to do whatever. Just tell me, I'm here to help. That statement sends so many people into an absolute rage. And I think I think the most important thing to go back to on that is to who you married before all of this, right? Like, go back to that woman before she became a wife and a mother. Like, these women are usually people, I mean, they've gone to school, they've worked really hard, they grew up thinking that, a lot, not all, but a lot of these, things that were holding back previous generations, women, they've been solved. Like, like,
Totally.
this man, he treats me as an equal,
Right.
right? In their dating relationship,
Right.
they think that that is what they are signing up for, two equal people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the type of marriage that they are signing up for.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's that slippery slope.
Yep.
Watching things change slowly and finding themselves all of a sudden being like this weird leave it to beaver woman who's like begging her husband to do things.
Right.
And she's going, who are you? Who am I? How did I allow this to happen?
Yep.
Right? It's that kind of stuff.
Yep.
It's that drives them nuts when they're like, I don't want to have to tell you how to help. And because it sounds like such a nice statement, right? Like, just tell me and I'm willing to help you.
Right.
And like, so it's kind of like, well, why would she fly off into a rage? And it's like, it's because of that identity piece too. It's
Right.
like how you feel about what's happening right here. Like, I didn't sign up for this. This wasn't the agreement. And I'm not that type of woman. And so now it's almost like you're saying that part of this was my responsibility,
Right.
to keep you responsible. Like, where in the world did we sign up for this? That wasn't what was happening. And so I think it's almost like this weird, like, gaslighty thing too that happens where people are like I'm not this. I never was this. And all of a sudden I find myself in this, like the Leave It to Beaver syndrome, right? Like, where it's like, have you seen, what's that show, the WandaVision, where they go back through the different episodes of...
I have not, but my husband watches it, so I catch it. I've caught it on the TV here and there, and I've seen what you're referencing. Yeah.
Yeah, where it's like these, oh, I shouldn't even talk about it because I'm not going to do it right and people are going to get mad, but that's okay. Of like living in an old episode from these past decades, or these, where it's so gaslighty. It feels so like surreal.
Yeah.
And like, you know what I mean? So I think that that dynamic is something that is, not only is it, this doesn't feel fair, and I want you to understand and help, not help because it's not helping.
Right. I know. It's so
like,
hard to talk about and use the appropriate language.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Be responsible.
Yeah.
Be as equally responsible as I am. The husband is like, well, I just don't see it. I just don't, you notice these kinds of things better than I do. It, like, for women to just be like, that's not possible.
Right.
That's not possible.
Right.
The reason why is because you have taken a backseat role. you are living in the same environment that I am, and you own the same eyeballs that I
Mm-hmm.
have. You see it, you choose not to pay attention to it because you know that I will step up when you haven't, you know. And I think it just drives people crazy again, not only because of how unfair it is and what happens, but also because you've taken who I used to be
Mm-hmm.
and you've almost forced me to be somebody that never said that I was going to
Yeah.
do. And it just feels like such a violation of their identity.
Yeah.
Um, that, you know, when we talk about that empowering women and them sort of reclaiming their life, like that's a lot of what people talk about getting excited for, of like, you know, I no longer have another person that I need to take care
Yeah.
of. I was already doing it. And so this is where it'll be easier for me is, you know, not doing that. Have you seen that? You're probably thinking, Corinne, you're not short on words at all. I could talk for 17 hours
Okay.
and like,
That's good.
um, have you seen that blog that written by that man that was, I got divorced because I wouldn't do the dishes?
It sounds familiar, but I didn't see it.
You
I'll
should
look it
Google
up.
it. Because you know, obviously the title is to grab you, or it's something like
Oh, I
that. Like my
totally
work,
did see this. Yes, I did. But he come
yeah,
and I'm if I'm recalling correctly, he gets to the real point though, right? Like he figures it
exactly.
out,
Yeah,
but it's too late.
it's
Yeah.
too late. Yeah, it's so clickbaity. Like you click on it because you're ready to be mad at him,
Yeah.
right? Like that's how he wrote it, and you're like, oh my gosh.
Yes.
But then you read through it, and he at the yeah, and then he gets there, and he's like that was on me,
Yeah.
man. Like
Yeah.
I allowed this to happen, and he's so sad about
Yeah.
it, you
Yeah.
know. And I hear that from men all the time. Of they're like, I wish I would have known. And I think that's why I talk about it so much publicly, is because I'm like, I'm
Yeah.
hoping to grab people before they get to that
Mm-hmm.
point and before that they lose this relationship, that they're really playing with fire, you know, really understanding that, um, it is the dishes and it's also bigger than the
Yeah.
dishes. It's both at the
A
exact same
hundred
time.
percent. And also because it's not just the dishes. It's the dishes. It's the stuff that's at the bottom of the stairs that needs to go up that everyone else in the house walks by unless unless she says, "Hey, can someone take that upstairs?" Or, it's everything. It's like I don't know. You hit so much on the head. I love how you have made it so clear for me personally that it really is so much also about that identity piece, of really feeling like and I'm going to say millennials, like we're not the generation that our mothers were. We're not the generation that our grandmothers were. And yet here we are. And the difference, it's like men, men, it's like they've done just enough, right? Like they'll change a diaper, but if I say, "Hey, can you change the diaper pail?" It's like, "Well, what's that and where do I get it from?" It's like there's baby steps, but we're still in the position of generally running the household, having to say who, what, when and where for our kids, for our house, for what needs to get done. And yeah, it's like I know that feeling so well. It's particularly in our kitchen. When I walk into our
Mm,
kitchen, it's like my eyes are
hmm.
just scanning everything that needs to get done: the dishwasher, the sink, the food. I have two little kids. They're constantly throwing food on the ground and like the floor. It's like I can't walk into the kitchen and not see everything that needs to be put away or cleaned up. And it's like, I noticed, and he's going to laugh because my husband listens to the shows, so I'm treading lightly. But I laughed yesterday because I was making a salad for dinner and I noticed that I dropped a piece of cucumber on the ground. And I was like, oh, I'll get that in a second. And, I got busy. I forgot about it. And last night, so he comes home late and he walks in and out of the kitchen. It was right between our kitchen and our family room where it fell. And I walked over it a few times. But so did he. like at the end of the night, I still looked at the cucumber and went, oh, I never picked that up. And it's like, I looked at it and I went, he literally stepped over this cucumber how many times and didn't just go, why didn't I pick that up? It's like,
Yeah.
obviously it's not there on purpose, but still for like 2 hours it was sitting there and I ended up being the one. And I have to say, I did not leave it there as a test. I was just done for the night. I just didn't want to do
Mm.
one more thing. But I'm like, how? Like, you see it. You have to see it. It's not there. We're not feeding any animals. It's not there on purpose. Like, pick it up. And it's
We're not making a new decorative
right.
statement with cucumbers
Exactly.
on the
And it's
floor.
exactly that. It's those little things that he doesn't even remember today that was on the ground. But here I
Mm.
am, the next day having a conversation with you and feeling like so triggered by a piece of cucumber that, like, yeah, he just walked over. It's tough. It's really tough because if I say to him, hey, you walked over a piece of cucumber, it's exactly like you were saying before. They're not socialized to be in touch with how that feels for me. And
Hmm.
and then it's frustrating because I know he'd be like, it's a piece of cucumber, like you didn't pick it up. Blah, blah, blah. It's like, it's not about, it's so, like you said, it's about the cucumber, but it's not about the cucumber. It's like
Yeah.
it's like it's about all of it. It's the build up. It's about how many cucumbers have there been on the floor. How many,
Mm.
it's, I don't know. I'm going to stop myself before I get
Yeah.
myself in trouble, but it's like,
It's about the all the micro
yes.
cucumbers that have happened over time, and it's about that identity piece that you're talking about is I didn't sign up for this. Like I thought we were two equal partners and taking equal responsibility for things, and somehow we've fallen into
Yes.
these gendered
Mhm.
roles where I'm responsible for the house and you're responsible for the outside, and I didn't agree to
Yeah.
that. And like when I tell you that there's a problem, that this isn't how I want our lives to be. And you just get angry, or you tell me, like, hey, it's not that big of a
Mhm.
deal. It's like, it is a big deal because,
Yeah.
I grew up thinking that this wasn't going to be
Yeah.
it, like that this was like an equal partnership. And here I'm responsible for all of these things. And you're just saying, I don't see
Right.
them. I do this. Lovingly, so lovingly. It's gonna sound, I hope that it sounds loving when I say it, because it might sound like kind of rude or something. In session with people, sometimes I will say, is that how you handle things at work?
Mm.
And and I know that they don't. I already
Right.
know, right? Because they have these jobs that require them to pay attention to so many detail and to show up in this way. And it's always, no, you don't do that at
Right.
work. You don't purposely look past these types of things. I mean, there's a little bit of, we know that people will show up differently based on like their gender and their race too,
Yeah.
like taking on more and whatnot. But what I'm generally talking about though is
No, you're
um
making the point that you behave one way and you come home and you think you can do something else. Like, think about it
yeah.
in a similar way.
Right. And like when we're having these types of conversations, this usually flows into like how, well, whenever I do something, I don't do it right. Right. She gets mad at me because I'm not doing it her way.
Mm.
And so, and she'll go too. She'll be like, yeah, and is that okay? Like they both are, both people are genuinely like, they want to know, like, how do we know if I'm being too controlling or too sensitive about
Mhm.
something, or the other person is not doing enough or not taking it seriously enough? And often it comes down to, are you creating more work later on?
Mm.
Are you cutting corners now, which will create more work later
Mhm.
on?
Mhm.
I always feel like that's the litmus test on
Yeah.
that is, um because like when you talked about walking into your kitchen and you're
Mhm.
scanning, right? What you're doing is you're looking for all of the things that need to get done so that you can end your day,
Yes. Yes.
right?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm doing. Yes.
Exactly. And so you're like, so there's certain things too where you're going like, okay, I need to run the dishwasher, because if that doesn't happen now tomorrow morning when I get up, and I need to give the baby its bottle and those aren't clean, then I'm going to have to wash those in the morning, which I'm going to be tired. The baby's going to be crying.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to be way the hell more stressful than me just doing
It's
it now.
exhausting.
Right. And so,
Mm-hmm.
like, it's exhausting. And so that's what women are talking about all the time, where they're like, the diaper bag is packed this way not because I'm a control freak. You know me. I'm that cool chick you met in the bar, like who was doing frickin' shots. Like, you know me. I'm not a control freak,
Yeah.
right? The diaper bag is packed like that because when we come in, then we can dump it like this
Yes.
and then grab these things and replace
Mm-hmm.
here and we'll know. And then that's the least amount of
Mm-hmm.
work that it'll save me. It'll save me. It'll save you. It'll save the baby crying
Mm-hmm.
time, and that's why it's like that, right? And
Yeah.
so that's what I always talk to people about of when they ask that question. How do we know when she's being controlling
Mm-hmm.
or he really is not doing things the way that need to be done? Like, oh, I packed the diaper bag and he just threw a bunch of stuff in there.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't the way that she had shown him how to do
Mm-hmm.
it, right? And she had developed this way of doing it because it's going to save all of them more work later
Yeah.
on, right? And it's that question. It's like, okay, are you doing it your way? And it still works. It's a little different than how she wanted, but it still works and it doesn't create more work later
Yeah.
on. Then she might have to let go a little
Yeah.
bit,
Yeah.
right? But if it creates more work later on, then the answer
Yeah.
is no.
Right.
You don't just get to do that. You don't get to help. I'm
Quote
doing
unquote help.
quotations right
Yeah.
now. Quote unquote help and cut
Yes.
corners. Now you're turning your super cool hot wife you met at the bar who took crazy shots and did all these things. You are turning her into a rage machine, and she is not that. Like, allow her to be
Yes.
that super cool, beautiful person that she always
Yes.
was by just doing it this way. And sometimes a good analogy is like if your boss said, hey, this is how we file
Mm-hmm.
things at work, because
Mm-hmm.
when that new client is walking in, we're able to grab it and this and there's
Mm-hmm.
a whole system
Yeah.
developed,
Yeah.
right? If you were like, nah, bruh, I'm just gonna do it my way, you would be fired. Like, you don't get to do
Nah,
that.
bro.
Like, you have,
It's funny.
right? You have to pay
Yeah.
attention and ask. Like, it's very rare to meet people. It does happen. It definitely happens where but it is more rare to meet people who are developing these like controlling systems just for control's sake.
Mm-hmm.
It's much more likely that people have developed these systems because it creates efficiency, it's more effective, and it creates less work later
Mm-hmm.
on. And so it's like, learn about
Right.
it then. If you found yourself in this situation, learn about why it's like
Mm-hmm.
that, and then really show up. Otherwise, you're just asking for trouble
Right.
between the two of you, which neither of you want. I say that all the time. I'm like, she doesn't want to be mad at you
Right.
either.
Right. Right. Well, I will.
Like, it's not fun.
A perfect example. Instead of throwing a fit over the cucumber, I picked it up because I don't want to be in a fight. I don't want to look at him and go, "You couldn't pick up the cucumber," And the
Right.
thing is, and I want to say, and I think you're doing such an amazing job in a way that I've yet to hear explain this, because it's, I'll speak for myself. My husband, when we have something serious going on, or I'm really bothered by a situation, or I'm really feeling underappreciated in some way, and I really am going to take the time to sit down and talk to him about it, he responds. He hears me and he responds. And the difference is exactly this, that there are just, I just love, and you've said so much, but I just so love that it's like that you're really making clear how it's the little things that are really speaking for such a bigger concept, that it's just hitting so on, because I'm not going to take the time to have a sit down, quote unquote, about a
Yeah.
cucumber or about 12 cucumbers. But it's still something that I looked at and had to go, do I want to make an issue of this? No. all right, but I had to have that conversation with myself, and it's frustrating. And
Yeah.
I don't know. I know that I might have taken us a little bit off track there, but and I know I did that because I really felt like for myself and my marriage, I needed to say out loud that I do see and acknowledge when I am making a point of something in a respectful way, I am heard. Um, but
Right.
but
Yeah.
but that's something I wanted to ask you about too. And I know we're getting long now. I'm going to wrap it. But one thing, because you also speak about this so wonderfully, but some of the ways in which couples misunderstand an argument and what the point of an argument is, like some mistakes they make when arguing. You've done a couple of videos on this. Maybe it was just one that I've watched over and over again. I don't remember. But I just love your thoughts on that. And if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about that, because I think everything we're saying is so true. And then sometimes, yeah, like you said, the end result is rage, right? It's just rage.
Yes.
So the next step can sometimes be an argument. Like what is the end goal of this
Right.
argument, and what are maybe some best practices for air quotes arguing, and some mistakes that couples often make when arguing.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. Um, so for arguing, I think one of the best practices that you can do is what we talked about right in the beginning is trying to detach yourself a little bit from what we're talking about. Like I almost sometimes I coach people, I'm like, okay, they're not like you're gonna put yourself in a mindset where they're not even talking about you. Okay. They're just telling you what they're upset about.
Mm.
And so and your job is to listen, to understand. And I always say, I'm like, think like a scientist or think like a journalist, which means your job is to be able to write that report or write that article
Mm-hmm.
afterwards, not tell you how you feel about
Yeah.
it. It's about how they feel about it, right? So you're gonna try to listen to them doing that. And when you can healthily, when you can detach in a healthy way and
Yeah.
listen, that's when you're going to get the most information, right? Because a lot of times it does come down to like identity stuff of like how you're so mad because of it's not just this, it's not me attacking
Mm-hmm.
you, it's me having these big feelings about
Yeah.
something. And so if you can remove yourself, that's really good, and then be able to listen, um, uh, take in what they're saying. Your biggest points are going to be how they feel. How does your partner feel? So this is what you're going to do. Let me get real clear on this. Okay. You're going to detach in a healthy way. They're not even talking about you. I'm going to listen to you, and I'm going to try to listen to understand exactly how you feel about a certain situation, about what you're talking about. I'm going to try to understand the context and what you are asking for, what needs to
Mm-hmm.
change. And then I'm going to tell you back all of that. I'm going to tell you how you're feeling about it, about the context. And you don't have to get it word for word. You're not trying to win a contest. I always tell people simple is
Mm-hmm.
best. So sometimes it's like A+ gold star students. They're like, I'm going to tell you, but I'm going to like show you just how much I
Right.
understand by telling you extra and
Yeah.
more and how it might, I'm like, don't do
Yeah.
that. Like if they say, I am mad, I want you to say, you are mad. I am mad about the cucumber on the floor because it feels like it's always my responsibility. And that really frustrates
Yeah.
me because I thought we were equal partners in this, right? And what I need from you is to look around and notice the things that need to happen and be more proactive.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I would feel really, sometimes the thing that people are asking for is I just need you to understand how I
Yeah.
feel, you know?
Yeah.
And so that's best practice. Worst practice is you can make it about you. You can get defensive. You can take that topic and relate it to another one, right? Like that's what always, those are
Mm-hmm.
terrible fights that we've all been in, where it started, you're like, okay, I'm gonna talk to you about um leaving your socks on the floor. And then 20 minutes later, you both are screaming about like that time back
Yeah.
when and da da,
Yep.
all
Oh
these
yeah.
different things.
Oh
And
yeah.
so
Yeah.
that is worst
Yeah.
practice when somebody tells you something and then you go, yeah, but you did
Mm.
this. And then they go, yeah, but what about when you did this? And all of a sudden, like you're talking about 10 different
Mm-hmm.
things, you're not accomplishing anything, and you're both super angry, you know? Um, yeah. So that's
What do what do you
what I would
what do
say for
you
people.
think
Go ahead.
is a productive way to think about an argument? Like, what is the end goal of an argument? What's best case scenario?
I love that question because yeah, I love that question. You can tell you've done therapy when you when you ask a question like
Who, me? Little old
yes.
me?
Yes, you totally have because you're doing that self-reflection.
Uh-huh.
You're like, well, what is it that, what's the main issue? What's coming up for me? And what am I looking for? Like, what's the goal here? And so, um, yeah, I tell people all the time, I'm like, not to be a dork, like a therapy dork, but like, this is all good data,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
you're learning so much about each other,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And every time you do, you know a little bit better about them. And the goal is to bring you closer together every single time. Those fights where you end and it feels like you've actually gotten
Yeah.
somewhere, right? And it's like, oh my God, I didn't realize, and maybe you didn't, maybe that person didn't even realize too. So if I was to say it to people, um, when it comes to arguments or if you're upset about something, I think the best thing you could do is to ask yourself what's really going on here for you and really try to go deep and like zone in on what it really, like what is the crux of
Mm-hmm.
this so that you're able to understand and then you can communicate it better too.
Mm-hmm.
um and ask what you're looking for, like it, so you want me to pick up cucumbers, like, well,
This should be
yeah.
interesting the day this episode airs. You're gonna wish you were a fly on the wall in my house, I'm sure.
Yeah, maybe we should let it go. You could just you could bleep some of this out. um No, but that's what I
Yeah,
would say to
yeah,
him
I hear
too,
you.
is what you had said earlier is like you gave him so much credit. You're like, when I am calm and I've thought it through and I bring it to him, he does so good because he's a good guy and he genuinely cares about
Mm-hmm.
you. And so it's like, well, I can see the goodness
Yeah.
there, right? And you can see the goodness
Right.
there. And it's just like, how do we do this quicker?
Right.
And how do we have this not even be a thing in the first place?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it is about, it takes so much energy to have these
Mm-hmm.
conversations. And that's what sucks about it, is
Yeah.
because it's like like you said, sometimes I just let it go.
Yeah.
And other times I have to, when I can feel it bubbling up and it's not just this one thing, it's this thing plus that and this and this and that. That's when I know I need
Yeah.
to. Um,
Yeah.
but the hard conversations are what bring us closer together
Yeah.
in order to make these big improvements. And hopefully we can get the word out about emotional intelligence and start making this be just something that we're talking about.
Thank you for so um just clearly stating what I think so many women are thinking and feeling. And you know it's tough. It's a tough I don't know, obviously marriage is tough, and communicating these things is really hard, especially if you don't have the tools and the skill set and the experience to even begin the conversation. It can be really daunting. And so I think that I would just encourage everyone to look up your accounts. You provide so much guidance, but also I think so much of it is knowing what language to use, and I think
Mm,
that it helps us get really clear on separating, like you said, what's emotional versus how do I communicate the emotion. And your accounts do a really great job at that. So I will link everything, all your accounts in the show notes for everybody. But thank you so much. I feel like there will be a part 2 to this because I think I
Yeah.
still have another page of notes that we didn't even get to. So, but Corrin, thank you. This was amazing. And I don't know that I'll ever be able to eat cucumbers with my husband again, but we'll work on it.
Oh no. No, it'll be good. Maybe the next episode will be like when the the next thing's a tomato or something like that. And I'll be like, can we book another podcast episode? And be like, sure. No, just kidding. No, yeah, we should definitely, we have so much more to talk about when
Yeah.
it comes to this, because it's just, like you said, it's not easy.
Yeah.
And it's about it, and it's also deeper. And so hopefully being able to make people feel seen and normalize their situation, and then also say like, and there's hope, right? Like there's things that can happen. And also, if you choose to walk away too, like you've done the best you can, and we see how hard that journey has been for you as well, and is for the other person too. It's like all of these things can be true at once.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
this was a fun conversation. I love your podcast.
Thank you.
And I'm happy you're doing it and taking what you have gone through and then trying to help other people. It's amazing.
Thank you. Thank you. So good. Oh, did you find yourself nodding along the whole time like I was? I appreciate Corrin so much for giving a voice, giving language, and more importantly, providing tools to work through what seem very simple, yet are often very uncomfortable moments in our relationships. And, I listen to this show and I go, yes, this is what my show is about. My show is about understanding that whether it's for yourself, for your relationships, for your kids, when you're lovingly and willingly a part of these dynamics and you want the best for those dynamics, most often the best thing you can do is to do your own inner work. All good things come from that. And, the conversation around gender roles and generational ideologies, like, yes to all that. And it's so funny because it really made me think, I'm a millennial woman, and I did have that belief that I was going to enter into a marriage, enter into a partnership that would be 50-50. I didn't really think about it past that, right? Like, what does 50-50 look like? Is 50-50 realistic? 50-50 in everything? Or, like, I didn't think past that, right? I didn't, at the time, like, I was young, I didn't need to, and it didn't matter, and I guess it should have mattered, but I didn't realize how much it did. And what I'm getting at is that I just, like, had that blanket belief, right? But in a lot of ways, it's not how I behaved. I behaved like what I saw. So what I saw from other relationships around me, other generations around me, were these very typical gender norms and gender roles. So, I'll never forget when my husband and I were dating and we moved in together, I was so excited to make him a sandwich. Like, I took my sweet time perfecting this sandwich because I was so excited to finally have someone to make sandwiches for. And I almost felt like it was some like badge of adulthood, or this confirmation of our commitment and love for each other. And although it sounds ridiculous to say that a sandwich did all of that, it's to Corrin's point that it was about the sandwich, but it wasn't. I was emulating what I saw in how to show love, connection, and commitment. I wanted to show him, but more importantly, I think I wanted to show myself that, yeah, we were the real deal because, A, I'd never made anyone else a sandwich before, but B, this is what I saw. I saw my mom, my grandparents, my aunts. I saw them care for their husbands in this way. And, you know, I had never lived with anyone before, and I don't even want to say this out loud, but I have to, is that I was actually excited to do his laundry. I envisioned, I don't know how I did that. Like, I'm like really confused. I really thought things would be equal, but I envisioned being this little housewife, right? And and I'm sure he would tell you that it didn't take long for me to get over it, right? Like I stopped just like willingly making sandwiches pretty early on, and I would do the laundry, but there were many a fights about how I would fold it and leave it on his side of the bed. Again, because that's what I saw in my house growing up, and he just like wouldn't put it away. And, he didn't care. Like, he would put it on a dresser and yada yada. And I took it as this like personal attack on my integrity and my all the all the things I was doing for him. Like, you can't just put your laundry away, and that's a whole other thing. But my point is that it's tough because I sort of bought the ticket to let's have everything equal, but it's not actually what I saw modeled for me. And so in my young years of this relationship, I thought, well, this is not only this is what you do, but I took pride in doing it. And so my come to Jesus moment right now with myself, and I actually had it as I was writing this outro, that I can say all the things to my kids because they were all said to me. All the girl power, all the yah, all the equality, all of that was said to me. So I can say all of that to my kids, but they have to actually see it. They have to actually see it in action for it to be really meaningful and impactful. And yes, I saw my mom working her butt off. But like I said, I also saw very gendered roles in my house. My mom did the grocery shopping, the cooking, the cleaning, the child rearing, and went to work. And my dad went to work, and, Corrin and I kind of joked about it. Like, he took care of the outside of the house and the cars and the bills and the trash. And I could see that they were very much in love. I could see that they very much loved me and took good care of me. So it's like, of course I'd want to recreate that. I just didn't think about the implications of recreating that combined with the messaging I received that things should be equal and how confusing that would be later on. And I don't have a lot of answers at the moment. All I know is that my daughter, if things keep going the way they're going, will probably think that it's really cute to make her first partner who's serious a sandwich, and might be excited to do all of their laundry. And oh my gosh, that's hard for me to sit with. So I've really been working on showing her when I take time for myself, but it's not enough. It's not enough. It's not enough. Anyway, and my son, my son has to see it too. My son has to see that the men in his life take active roles in doing all the things. And this, it's so hard to talk about, right? Because they do, right? Like my husband does. He'll cook, he'll do the dishes, he changes diapers. So it's already different from previous generations. It really is. It's just we gotta keep doing it. And yeah, and I'm gonna stop there. Because they are, right now, just for me, they're observations and they're discoveries from my inner work and my questioning and understanding how and why I think the way I do, how and why, my life is the way it is. And that might sound harsh, and I don't mean it to be. I just mean, oh, okay. When something makes sense, when I can understand it, then I can deal with it, if that makes sense. And you can hear that it doesn't fully make sense because I'm not fully making clear sense to you now. Anyway, okay. Please share with me what all of this brings up for you. however we communicate, whether that's on social media, email, text, wherever. Just let me know if you have a thought about any of the wonderful, things Corrin shared, anything that I've fumbled through sharing with you here today. And that being said, Corrin, thank you so much. I know we will be chatting again. And thank you for listening, not only to the show, but to this outro that is done now. Promise. Okay, bye. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Sass Says is a production of Luann Nigara, Inc. This podcast is meant to be educational and not meant to replace professional therapy or professional medical attention. To learn more about today's show and what's new in my world, head over to sasssays.com. Thanks so much. Talk later.